Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Michelle Nelson Schmidt. She is here to celebrate her brand new picture book, Herman, born here in Boston. She's also going to tell us what it was like to have one of her books banned. Before we invite Michelle into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Snoodles, Cadoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles by our friend Stephen Joseph. This is a hilarious book about vehicles that run on noodles and the delicious aroma that is all around this town, and the controversy that Noodlemobile creates when it replaces vehicles powered by sauerkraut. It's a really, really fun book. It'll bring a smile to even the crankiest of faces. Check it out today. Snoodles, Cadoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles by Stephen Joseph. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by The Secret Science of Sports, the math, physics, and mechanical engineering behind every grand slam, triple axel, and penalty kick. Written by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. Why does a football spiral? How do some athletes jump so high? The answer is science. The Secret Science of Sports helps kids better understand concepts of science, technology, engineering, and math through the sports they love to play and watch. The Secret Science of Sports will help ignite your young athlete's interest in the STEM field. And if your young one already loves the STEM fields, it's a great way to ignite their interest in exercise. Get it today. The Secret Science of Sports by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. Join us right now from the beautiful Sunshine State of Florida, where I'll be visiting a lot in the future because my son and his wife just moved down there. Please welcome back to the show our friend Michelle Nelson Schmidt. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me back again, Jed.
I'm really excited. Michelle, if you aren't familiar with Michelle, if you're one of the few people in the world who aren't familiar with Michelle, she's an incredibly successful author. She's been published both traditionally, mostly through Usborne, and also has chosen to publish a number of her books independently. She's self-published a number of her books. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and why she made that choice. But I also want to talk to her about a situation where one of her books was recently banned from a school system. And I know Michelle is a phenomenal writer who's very well respected, and I can't imagine what horrible thing you wrote in this book to get it banned.
Yeah, I had the audacity to be inclusive in this book and mention that Sebastian, one of the characters in my series, a main character, has two dads. And the book is about adoption. Sebastian is adopted, and his family just adopted his new little sister. And that's what the book is about. The book is about adoption and it's not really actually about adoption. It's about the fears that an older child has when a new baby comes. That's what the book is about. And he happens to have two dads. And that was the controversy. That was the big problem with this book.
Yeah. I suppose if we were talking in 1920 or 1957, maybe, but this year 2022. And, I'm at a loss because I don't get. And this is a public school, so we're not talking about a religious school where, and again, one of the things that we advocate here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast, it doesn't matter where you fall on a certain subject. And we've had authors of that features all sorts of characters. But no matter where you fall on a certain topic, the one thing that we should be teaching our kids is that every single person deserves to be loved, respected, and included. And part of teaching our kids that is acknowledging that there are people who are different and live different lifestyles, and that's okay. That those right. people need to be respected, loved, and included.
Well, and my children are now going to be 26 and going to be 24. And when they were in elementary school, there were students they were friends with that had same-sex parents. I mean, 20 years ago. This is not brand new. This is not just, so it does seem very backwards, a lot of things that are happening. And I traveled for 10 years throughout the entire United States, seeing so many different children, seeing so many different families. And in this particular series of books, the reason I wrote it, and I wrote it over COVID, it's an 18-book series, was A, to have something to do when my travel just stopped, but B, because everybody deserves to see themselves in a book, every single person. And with this series, I knew I could do that with so many different things. There's a main character in one of my books, Flora and the Fairy, and she's the star of the show. And the book is all about stage fright. She happens to be in a wheelchair. That has nothing to do with the storyline. And that is important for kids too, that it's not what the book is always about. That's their circumstance. And there's, I'm different from them and they're different from me. And that is what is so important, to normalize all these different situations. And so I was taken aback truly when the librarian reached out to me to let me know this had happened, and that every principal and superintendent had decided it was too controversial and it couldn't even be in the library. It was not a book in the curriculum. It was a book that they didn't even want a child to accidentally pick up off the shelf. And that stunned me and saddened me so much, because this librarian said, I have children in this school that their family looks like Sebastian's family. And that broke my heart for the kids that need to see that my family's here too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that I don't, especially with this particular book, is say that you have a very religious background and have very firm convictions about what is proper and what isn't proper. You would want to sit down and have that conversation with your kids. Not to judge, not to condemn, but just say, hey, this isn't something that we agree with. And sit down and have that conversation with your kids instead of throwing the book away, banning the book, and let's pretend that this isn't happening.
Right. And that is what I have zero, I respect any, whatever your beliefs are, that is fine. But this exists. And that's exactly why my books also, I always say these are great read aloud books, because they open up lots of discussions, especially about fears and anxieties. They're meant to have these conversations. And again, I guess my question with people, that if it's particularly, religion, that you don't want your child exposed to this, wouldn't your religion be able to stand up to the discussion? Mm-hmm. And if you're too scared of that, then there's deeper questions there. Mm-hmm. about what your belief system is. And I think that just an open, honest discussion, especially for how kids can handle that themselves. And do you not want your child to learn that from you? Mm-hmm. Because eventually they're going to be exposed to it and they are going to hear things. And I think the safest way is to, in a very age appropriate way. And that's what these books, they're very age appropriate. He happens to have doodads. He's introduced to it, everybody in the series, the readers are introduced to Sebastian in book 3, where Sam is inviting him over to come after school with Jonathan James. And she says, well, go home and ask your mom to call my mom and to arrange it. which is the typical, what happens. And Sebastian very matter-of-factly says, well, or dad. And she goes, huh? And he goes, well, actually, dads too. And he holds up 2 fingers. And he goes, I have 2 dads. I don't have a mom. And she goes, okay, we'll just have your dad call my mom. And that's it. And with children in general, that's usually it. That's, oh, okay, that's your life. This is my life. Tell your dad to call my mom. And that's it. And I did have, when that came out, I had one parent that, a friend on Facebook actually, that said, I just don't understand why you have to expose children to sexuality at 8 years old. And I'm like, I don't think I did. I don't think I did. I think I just mentioned that he has 2 dads. But that perception of that's inappropriate. And I just, stood firm in that. And many, many people on Facebook, I was glad to see, very kindly defended, something that I'm proud of my Facebook following. We don't get into nastiness. People know I won't tolerate it on my page. And so people are very respectful, even when they disagree. So, but yeah, that even surprised me.
It's funny that same line, why did you have to bring sexuality into it and, into this book for 3rd graders or 4th grade? Back in 1989, I produced a disabilities awareness video called Melt Down the Walls That Separate. And we had this very diverse cast of both racially and ability-wise, and me playing my clown character. And kind of the thing that was moving the story through, talking about, everybody belongs and everybody needs to be included. There was a singer, and I thought she was cute, and she gave me a kiss in the cheek, and I got excited and I fell off the stage. Just like, oh, wow, and fell off the stage. And then I came back, and then she decides she likes me. But that's it. That's a word in the song, she liked me. And a member of the board here in Massachusetts, the state agency that funded the program, said, I love everything about it, except why did you have to bring sexuality into this video for elementary school kids? And I'm like, wait a minute. I filmed it. I edited it. I wrote it. What are you talking about? Well, it's the little kiss in the cheek. I'm like, whoa.
And my question there is, have they seen, I don't know, any Disney movie ever made? I mean, romance is across the board, like anything. And I just, that's funny. You're like, what? Yeah.
Well, and again, the Disney, I did have I did an illusion on stage which involved stage knives, swords, and obviously stage prop and whatnot. I had cleared it with the principal beforehand and the PTA, and no one screamed, no one got frightened. We didn't appear to assault anybody on stage. We just made somebody's head disappear. And afterwards, the principal said to me, you should only do things on stage that are wholesome, like The Lion King. And so I went to see The Lion King, and I saw Simba's dad get murdered in the first 30 seconds, and I'm going, wait.
And most Disney moms aren't in the movie because they're already dead before it starts.
Before we move on, I don't know. It was a long time ago. I think here in Massachusetts there was a controversy about the state decided that the Catholic Church, which had really been at the forefront of adoption and helping kids become adopted, the state said, hey, you're not allowing gay couples to adopt, so we're not going to use your services anymore. That's discrimination. And I was like, well, yeah, I understand the church has a view, and I understand the state has its view, but wow, is there some way we can, because we need to get these kids into forever homes. And I was kind of like, where am I sitting on this thing? And a short time later, I was at a school in Maine, and I have a thing where I ask kids to tell me what they're thankful for, and then we do something magical. And this young man stood up. I had no idea he was at the back. And he said, Jedley, you don't know me, but I'm a foster kid, and I've never had a home. And yesterday I was adopted by my 2 dads. And for the first time in my life, I have a home. And at that moment, it became clear to me that we need to get these kids homes. And, so that was a very powerful moment for me. So, I'm really sad I'm sad for the kids in the school, that, aren't going to have a chance to read your book and aren't going to have a chance to have those conversations.
Well, the ironic thing that happens about banning a book, and I think secretly most authors get excited, because I know I did. The minute you have a banned book, the marketing is amazing. I sold so many books. I sold so many sets of books. I had so many people buy full sets for their kids' school. I probably made, the day my book was banned, I know I made $1,000 in sales that day. And in the course of the following weeks, I probably made another $2,500. So, because the people that complain, and again, it's fear. Mm-hmm. It is always fear-based, and it goes back to the opposite of love is fear. People are scared. People are scared of what they don't know. People are scared of what they're uncomfortable with. And those people are very loud, but I firmly believe they are a much smaller segment, but they're louder and they can cause a lot of problems. But the other people become louder when this happens. So the word gets spread, and I do think it actually will end up having the opposite effect, because now children that might never have paid attention at all are suddenly, wait a minute, why can't I read that? Or wait a minute, what are you talking about? And it's going to come up anyway. So it does have this almost opposite reaction. Like, there's people that would have never known about A New Sister for Sebastian that now it's in more school systems as a direct result of that one school system banning it. So that, I think, is the silver lining, that there's this opposite rebound effect that happens when a book gets banned.
Yeah. I have very vivid memories of growing up in Boston and almost 100 years ago, and seeing Banned in Boston written across all sorts of advertisements for movies and books and other media. So, yeah. Speaking of media, you've decided you have a new book coming out. It's called Herman, I believe, and this is also a self-published project?
It is. I wrote this book as a joke 7 years ago. Not as a joke. It wasn't a joke. It was a test of myself. I just started my story time that I do every Wednesday night on Facebook. And I started it because that year my husband got deployed and I was home with my kids. I couldn't travel. And I wanted to keep talking to kids. So I started story time, and it was literally a month after I'd started. So I think I had 4 viewers, and 2 were my parents. And I had been in Boston for a school visit, and a friend of mine had come to visit me, a college friend. And she had brought just a bunch of stuff for us to eat in the hotel because we didn't have a lot of time. So we were just going to like chit chat and eat. Well, she brought all like hors d'oeuvres and stuff, and she had brought a block of cheese. And she's like, oh my gosh, I don't have a knife to spread it or anything like that. And I went, oh, wait a minute. And I go through my purse, and I happen to find a butter knife. And she's like, why do you have a butter knife in your purse? And I just went, oh, it's a very versatile tool. I mean, it's a hammer, it's a screwdriver, and I'm like, I don't know, but you really can use it for anything. And so that became a running joke. And when I got home that next week, I ended up meeting a Boston police officer named Herman, and he was super nice because I had some extra time. So I had the name Herman in my head. And on story time that morning, I said, okay. And I announced it on Facebook. I said, I'm going to see if I can write a book about a butter knife named Herman before story time tonight. And I put it out there, and I'm like, I'm going to get another book idea. This is going to be great. Well, the whole day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got nothing. I couldn't come up with anything. And so about 4:00, I decided, okay, what I'm going to talk about on Storytime tonight is sometimes you set a goal for yourself and you fail. You don't do it. I said, that's just as good a topic to let kids know. Sometimes you don't make your goal. And as soon as I gave myself permission to have failed at this, the story popped in my head. And I started writing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it. And so I wrote the book of Herman, and everybody just loved it. So I just read it to the kids, and I said, use your imagination. Your imagination is so much better than any illustration I could ever come up with. So just picture Herman with me. And every year, people are like, when are you making Herman? And another book came up. When are you making Herman? But then I made another book, and all these books kept coming up. And then I kept reading it at story time, and it became a beloved story. And I started, drawing little graphics for it, making puppets for it. And people were like, when is Herman coming? Then I got so scared that if I gave Herman to my publisher, they were going to reject it, either because people heard the story or it just wasn't going to be for them. And that would have hurt my feelings. I was just like, I can't let Herman get rejected. And so then I end up self-publishing the 18-book series, and then I self-published my first picture book back in February called Please Mind the Bear, and that was so successful. So I said, all right, I think I can do Herman, and I'm going to self-publish it. And so it's been 7 years in the making. This book, it's called A Little Story About Spreading Love. It's only controversial if you have a problem with, anthropomorphizing, objects. And there was the best compliment I had was a mom wrote me, and her son was 3 years old when he first heard Herman. And she said, guess what? Michelle Nelson Schmidt finally made Herman. And she's like, he's about to be 10. And he said, Mom, I have to have that book. I have to have that book. And that was one of the biggest compliments that this little boy who grew up hearing Herman just, read to him is so excited for this book to come out. So there's big fans of Herman, and it comes out on this Saturday, and I'm donating 10% of all my sales that day for 24 hours to a children's home society of Florida here that is all about diversity, inclusiveness, keeping families together in hard situations, foster care, adoption. And so I thought it was a good, pairing. So I'm really excited about it. So
awesome.
That is what's happening with Herman.
That is fantastic. Some of the best things in the world have been born in Boston. So this is exciting. And I'm really glad that you were inspired by one of our police officers here in Boston. Police don't get the credit that they deserve. And so this is really, really, really fun. Real quickly, again, I understand why you made the decision. You didn't want Herman to be rejected, and that's why you went with the decision to self-publish. But overall, I'm thinking that there are people out there thinking to themselves, you've been traditionally published forever, and that's everybody's dream. It's everybody's every self-published author's dream to have that big traditional publishing company behind them. But you had that, and then you kind of reverse it. You had that traditional successful career going, and then you said, yeah, and then I'm going to self-publish too. Where did that decision come from?
Well, and I love my publisher, Usborne Books and More, Kane Miller. They are fantastic. I am in the company of incredible books. I truly am. But I think with me, because and there's different reasons people publish, and for some people, if it is the big name recognition, people, you want to go with that because it is hard when you're independent to get that. But what I started to realize was I don't need this 1 million person following, hundreds of thousand people. I need a pretty small dedicated group of people that's word of mouth. So my Facebook following isn't even that huge. It's about 7,000 people, but there's a main 500 people that always are buying my stuff, and they're telling other people, and it's growing slowly but surely. But I wanted a couple reasons. I wanted the control of the subjects I wanted to make, and that especially with the chapter book series. And if I had sold that book series to Usborne or any other publisher, it would have taken years, absolutely, 2 to 3 years if I'm lucky, and then if they decided to just discontinue a few books in the series, I couldn't do anything with the series and until they discontinued all of them. And so that was another negative. And nobody likes to talk about this in business, but I need to make money. Mm-hmm. I need to pay my mortgage. And when you self-publish, and I'm the author and illustrator, which means I get 10%. If I'm super duper lucky, I get 12% because of that escalating royalty, which nobody offers anymore. But 12% of a book. And let's just say for easy numbers, 10% of a $7 book is 70 cents. Mm-hmm. Now, if I publish that book myself, I'm going to make closer to $4 a book. And a picture book, you know, this cost me $8 because I print it in the United States. All my stuff is here in the U.S. It cost me $8 to make this book. I sell it for $16. I make $8 a book versus $16.99. I would have made $1.70. Now, if I was just the writer, I would have made 65 cents. And if I was the author, the illustrator, 65 cents. So, and people, when they hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to make money. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. And they're like, well, why do you do it? Because it's who I am. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, my husband is, he's a cryptologist. He's a computer programmer. People pay him a lot of money to do what he does. That just happens to be his skill set. And this happens to be mine. And I have to just, you know, I love what I do, but yeah, you got to sell a lot of books. And so if you're self-published, I only have to sell one of these books for 4 or 5 with my publisher. And I have to do all the marketing. I have to do all the advertising. I have to have the audience. Nowadays, traditional publishers, and there's so many bonuses to traditional too. There's a lot of upsides to that. But a lot of times they don't even want to publish you anymore if you don't already have your following. Mm-hmm. So if I'm now going to write it, going to illustrate it, going to market it, and I'm going to create the following, why am I going to give all that profit away to a publisher when I could sell direct and I can sell so much less and get more money? Yeah. So there's economics, there's a lot in there, but it also has to do with the control. But I do make sure I hire my editors. I have beta readers. I'm very careful, especially with children's books, because I do not think you should create a book unless it is the very best thing you can possibly produce, and you put as much professionalism into it, because children deserve that. And you're using, with children's books, precious resources, trees, paper. I mean, ebooks don't translate most of the time to children's books. So if you're going to make a physical book, I feel like you have to have the very best. Don't just write a book to do it. Right. Don't just create it just to say you did, because I think you might be wasting a lot of resources. And children deserve the best, to have it well edited and be a really good book. Yeah.
And I think that what you talked about, you sit down, and I kind of felt like I was watching an episode of Shark Tank. You know, because you're talking about, well, this is the return that I'm getting. I'm hearing, you know, Mr. Wonderful going, so what are the numbers? And you went through the numbers, and that is something that is, I think, so important for every author and every aspiring author to sit down and to realize before you start sending out, you know, this thing that you're creating it's a book, it's a message, it's a piece of art, but it's a business. And if you want to make the most of that piece of art, you need to treat it as a business and do the numbers, run the numbers. If you're going with a hybrid publisher who says, well, yeah, we'll get you 10,000 books that are going to come over from China, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars to do that, you need to sit down and figure out, well, how much can I sell it for, and how many do I need to sell a profit, to make a profit, and you need to do all that stuff before you make a decision and move forward.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've experienced this. It is very difficult to find that kind of information. People don't talk about the money, and I'm super open with it, and I do consulting, and I tell people the money, you know, and there are not these, some people get big advances, but that in general, especially not in children's books, you don't get these huge advances. I mean, you're lucky. I've never had a $10,000 advance. My advances were more like $2,500 a book. And I have to explain, when you get these huge advances, you have to earn that out. And most people don't understand what that is. And I said, there's plenty of people that never make another penny on their book because they never earn out their advance. And I run through all that and explain that. And that's another reason why, you know, I do print on demand, and that is a little bit higher to pay for the books. But there's reasons why you do it. I always have access to my books. I'm not waiting 4 months for, you know, a shipment from China. And I love the business aspect. I've been an entrepreneur since I was a little kid, selling my art. So I'm always concerned about things. And people will say, well, Michelle, why don't you make this? And I said, I'll never make my money back on that. It's a great product. It's a great idea. But to manufacture that would cost me $10,000, and it would take me 10 years to sell that stock. I know what sells. I know what doesn't sell just through practice and things. Like I have a plush that I'm making for my What If Monster anniversary. It says 10-year being in print. And I was willing to it was $7,000 to create these plushes. But I knew because it was an anniversary edition, I could charge a premium for it. I will make my money back on that. I actually in pre-sales made my print cost, but I ordered them in January. I won't get them until probably August or September, just in time for Christmas. And if anything goes wrong with the shipment, I don't know, maybe I won't have them. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of risks you take on with things like that. But I knew to keep licensing and merchandising rights when I made that book. So there's so much to it, and I happen to enjoy all that stuff, and that's why I've been able to create the business that I have.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you had a chance to share this insight with us. I think it's really, really important. Where can we go to find out more about Herman and find out more about you and your business that you're creating?
Well, my website, which is MNS, as in Michelle Nelson Schmidt, MNS Creative, is you can get all of my books, both traditional and self-published. You can, of course, find me on Amazon. I think everybody needs a presence there. But you can also, my books are available through Ingram Content. So if you want my books in your local bookstore or want to order from a local bookstore, which I always encourage to, you can call them up and they can get my books as well in their store. And you can just email me at michelle@mnscreative.com if you have any questions. I always love helping people if they want to pursue this journey or find out more. But that's the best place. And I'm on Facebook as well under my name. You can find me there.
Awesome. We've had a wonderful time speaking to Michelle Nelson Schmidt about the publishing business, about Herman, and about becoming a banned author. So cool. Hey, Michelle, thanks so much for being with us.
I appreciate you as always. Thank you so, so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Sandra V. Feeder. She'll be here to celebrate Angry Me. That's the next episode of the podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Michelle Nelson Schmidt. Please be sure to check out Herman. Also want to thank our sponsors, Jennifer Swanson, our Dean of all things Stimmenstein, and her book, The Secret Science of Sports. And, of course, want to thank Stephen Joseph. Be sure to check out Snoodles, Cadoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Ashley Contouras. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.